Hi, this is Steve Finn from Dr. Finn's Games, and I'm here to tell you about the differences between the original game, Cosmic Run, and the new version, which is going to be coming out soon, called Cosmic Run Regeneration. The first thing I'll tell you about, I don't have a box for the new game, but here's the original box, and this will be the box size of the game coming out. So the first thing you'll notice, this is a game that's going to be coming out soon from Dr. Finn's Games, but you'll see it's going to be on a slightly bigger box. I think it's the same width. It's a little steeper too. So the box size is going to be different. There's going to be different artwork, and I could put up a picture of the artwork right now to show you. So that's the artwork for the new game. Now let me talk about some of the component differences. So first of all, the original game had these planet tracks, which were 5 separate tracks, and you'd be racing up those levels to try to get to the track. But now with the new game, we have a board. It's going to be a tri-fold board, so it folds into, there's 3 parts to it. The tokens will probably be a little different. I think there's going to be a different, if we have a custom, we might have a custom shaped token if we reach a certain stretch goal. Otherwise, there'll be a slightly bigger piece than this with a rectangle with a different ship shape printed on it. But I'm hoping we get the stretch goal to have the custom shapes. So one big difference between this board and that is that there's a 6th planet, which has its own kind of rules to it. Let me just stay with the components for a minute. Each player is now going to have a tech card. Now, the new game, Regeneration, was printed, this prototype was printed at home, so the quality might not be so hot. But every person is now going to have one of these tech cards, as opposed to these tech cards. So this is going to be now a punch board. Originally people had this, and what they would do is they had a little square token, and this would keep track of their tech level, which would give them a certain power. In this game, however, in Regeneration, whenever you would normally advance your technology, instead of advancing your technology, you'd earn a crystal, and the tech card just simply tells you how many crystals it costs to perform a particular kind of action. For the most part, the actions are very similar to the original game, although in the original game you could draw tokens to score points, and you could draw a card with your original technology. Now, however, it's all about dice manipulation. Okay, another difference concerns the dice. It's not that big of a difference, but in the original game there were 6 dice included in the game of these colors, and in the new game there are going to be 7 dice with essentially these colors. And a big difference, this is probably the biggest difference really in the gameplay itself, is the way that the meteors strike the planets. So these are meteor cards from the original game, and the way that they would strike planets, meteors would strike planets, you'd roll the dice, and you'd look at the 2 red dice and compare them to the chart on the cards, and then depending upon the dice values, if there's a strike, it would hit the planet as shown on the blue die. But that whole mechanism, you don't have to look at the dice anymore. It's not going to be as random. So the mechanism now for meteor strikes is based upon what are these meteor cards, and they are specifically set up so that the meteors will be distributed across the different planets in a slightly more predictable, though still somewhat random pattern. But it's not completely random, and over the course of the game you know that they're going to be hitting the different planets. Okay, so another difference, I guess one of the major differences is that there's I don't know if I mentioned this already, there's a 6th planet which has its own rules for moving. in the original game. How you move up planets 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5 are the same as in both versions. But in this game, there's a 6th planet which has its own special rules, and that's what the that yellow die is for. It allows you to move up in that track. Another thing about as you're moving up in these tracks here, on some of these spaces, there are these infoterate tokens. The infoterate tokens are, in a sense, replacing these, which were the minor tokens in the original game. They both have values of 1, 2s, and 3s, but in the original game, they represented crystals. So the miners in the original game would go mining for crystals, which just gave you points. However, in this game, they're actually going to be, in Regeneration, there's actually going to be crystals, but they're not related to the Infoterace card. They're just, you just can take a crystal whenever you don't use a die. Whereas in the original game, you would draw a crystal token with one of these. In the new game, you will be drawing an Infoterace token, which just doesn't represent that you're getting crystals, but it's just power, or not even power, but points. So the Infoterace are, there to just help you get points. So, did I mention this? Geez, I'm losing track of things that I'm mentioning or not mentioning. In the original game, there are victory point tokens. Here, however, you are going to be moving around the outside of the track when you score points. So these were hidden in the original game, or you didn't have to tell people how many points you had, but now you'll have a general sense of how many points people have because you could see them on the board. However, during the game, when you collect these, you will keep them hidden from other people, so people don't know exactly how many points you have. And these are going to be on the board as well, which they weren't in the original game. So as you're moving, if you're the first person to hit and land on one of these tokens, you can score it. Now, some of the values as well have changed just a little bit. Track 5, for example, now is worth 30 points instead of 25. Track 1 is worth 12 instead of 10. 2 is the same, 3 is the same, and 4 went up a couple points as well, and some of these values were just adjusted a little. While I have the board set up, I'll just tell you about this 6th planet track. As in the original game, you're going to roll dice and assign at least one to a planet. 1 through 5 is the same. The way that you recruit aliens, these cards, is the same, although there's some differences about these cards, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the introduction of the yellow die in this 6th track, the way this works is you can assign the yellow die to the 6th track, but if you do, that's going to end your turn. And you have to place all the other dice before that, but you'll get to move the number of pips shown. So for example, if you roll a 6 on the very first roll and you want to move a lot on this track, if you do put it there on the first roll, you have to make sure you place your other dice in all the other places so that you can get that 6. Otherwise, you'd have to re-roll. And if the next roll it's a 2, then that wouldn't be a good time to place it. So there's some interesting decisions that you have to make there. Also on the 6th track, you can put different numbered white dice. And for each die you put there, you get 1 movement. So it's much more efficient to get a high number on the yellow, but it does give an option for a white die that wasn't in the original game. Okay, I'm now going to talk about the difference in the alien cards. So the first thing you'll notice is that the new game has 6 aliens. There's a new alien, and this is the Daha, which is like a pinkish color. The Daha's power is to let you take a turn with an additional die. So the red die is the die that's normally out, and then you just add that in to your pool. There's the pool of 6 dice. Oh, let me push it up into view. That's the normal pool. If you play the Daha, you can roll at the red die for an entire turn. The Tolanites are basically the same. Here's the new one. Now you'll see that all of the artwork has been, the graphic design has been a little bit updated. So it's, I think this looks a little slicker, as do the the action icons just look a little better. Now one of the main, this is a huge difference in the gameplay, is you'll see this card has this number 1 on it. All of the new cards have no numbers because all of the new cards are just one-time use. Some of the original cards, for example, this one, had a 4-time use. So when you play it, you turn it. So the first time you say, I have 4 uses on it. You use it once, and now you have 3 uses. Now you use it twice, use it again, and then you'd flip it over. And while I have it flipped over, you'll see this. Oh, let me grab a new one. There's a different. Now remember, this was printed out at home, so the cut here isn't good. But the back side now shows you what type of alien it is. So you can see what's coming up, but also now this will help you when you turn in sets of aliens. Because you could use the card, flip it over, and then you'll be able to keep track of what alien cards these are. Okay, let me tell you a little bit more now just about the differences in the powers. So the Tolanites are basically the same. They allow you to turn a face to anything else. The Monashians in the old game had various different powers. The Monashians in this game, it's been streamlined. They always now do the same thing. All Monashians will give you a virtual die of a specific number. So this will be as if this was a 2 die. The Chronoids in the original game have now been called to Chronics, I think. Chronoids, I didn't like the name as much. Again, updated art, graphic design. In this case, it's always the single time use, and you're either re-rolling up to 3 dice or up to 5 dice, whereas in the original game there was multiple use and different numbers of dice. The Grand Turn is always now turning 1 die up or down 1, or 2 dice up or down 1, whereas the original one, there was a little bit more flexibility. And then finally, the Infoterrays. This one now just allows you to draw an Infoterray token, which gives you points. This, it's the same power, you're just drawing, in this case, a minor token, which also gives you points. So those are some of the main differences with regard to the aliens. Now, during the game, this is a big, huge difference in the gameplay itself. In the original game, you could turn in your sets of aliens at the end of the game to score points. But in the new game, you have to turn them in during your turn. You could still turn them in at the end, but they're nowhere near worth as much. So during the game, you'll see on the board here, there is the honor board on the main board. And if you can turn in a pair of the same, you'd score 7 points. If you turn in 3 of a kind, you could score 12. And there are little tokens, which I can't find right now, but there, oh, here's one. So after you score, you put a token, an honor token, over the value. So a pair can be scored during the game 3 times. There's 3 of a kind, 3 different, and 5 different. So that is a very big difference. At any time during the game, in the new game, you could also just score 1 by itself for 1 point. And at the end of the game, every individual card is only worth 1 point. So it is much more valuable to turn them in during the game and take the points that are on here. So now there's a little bit of a race to turn in your alien cards. And they can be turned in whether they've been used or not. As before, there's a limit of 5 alien cards in your hand. Okay, one more thing I want to talk about, and that is in the new version, there's 2 whole new rules for co-op play, where each person will get a particular power. In addition, no matter how many players there are, there's going to be 2 ships at the bottom of each track. But if there's, say, for example, 3 players, each player will have 4 ships, and you would choose which tracks to have it on. So there'd be, for example, red and green here. There might be green and yellow, then red and green and yellow, red and yellow, red and yellow. and so on, so that each person is in charge of a certain number of ships, and you'd be trying to discover the planets. But it has the same basic rules as in the original game, but these really make a huge difference. So I think that kind of wraps up the main differences between these games, and I decided to keep this new version the same game because at its heart it's still the same game where you're rolling dice to try to move up these tracks for the most part in the same way, but with the addition of the 6th track and with the way that aliens score and a couple of the minor tweaks, it really feels like the same game, but it's also a different game. So I gave it the name Cosmic Run Regeneration. Please check out the Kickstarter when it happens in late February 2018. Thanks.